Hello, I'm Nadia Hunter. Welcome to Gallery Watch. We are here at Wesley Uniting Church in Perth CBD for the annual Easter exhibition entitled Stations of the Cross. Every year, 15 artists are carefully selected to provide their unique interpretation of each station. Claire, congratulations on the exhibition. How did it feel when you were first approached to curate?
I felt really honoured to be asked to do this show because it's got a 6-year history before I came on board, so it was kind of big shoes to fill after Catherine had been doing it for 6 years, Catherine Schwerz. Well, I was quite excited to have the opportunity to work with some of my favourite artists for this. When I was first asked, there was definitely a few artists that popped in my head straight away because they have kind of contemplative or reflective kind of practices, and their work kind of automatically came to mind. People like Tane Andrews or Paul Ullman. I wanted to actually have a wide range of artists across different types of artwork, so from textiles through to painting, sculpture, there's video work. We've got some very established artists, and we've also got artists who've actually just graduated from university. There's a strong theme of refugee issues and social justice kinds of issues which runs through a lot of the works, which perhaps I wasn't necessarily planning, but that's come through because the stations are very much about those human issues of loss and grief and some very serious issues, and so those social issues have come up. Yeah.
And I guess also it's the artist's interpretation of bringing it into the modern world as well.
That's right, yeah.
Can you tell me about your station and how you've interpreted it?
Okay, so I was given Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry his cross, and before I began I wanted to do a lot of research into how people felt about that parable. And for me in particular, I have a personal connection with the story because my great-grandfather's brother was in the First World War and he brought back a piece of the crown of thorns from Jerusalem. So I had that as my starting point. But for me particularly, I'm greatly concerned with how the refugees are being treated across our globe at the moment. So I wanted to obviously reference the contemporary issues there and the displacement of people. I've drawn from material metaphors in this work. So I'm looking at things like the idea that after war, all that's left is ash. When we die, our bodies become ash and earth, so that's part of the work as well. Into the ash drips the blood of Christ, and the numbers of drips are based on the 10,000 children that have gone missing recently as a result of the refugee crisis. The oak tree, which represents the cross that is carried, comes from Jerusalem in terms of the land that Christ was crucified on is full of olive trees. So it was really to do with creating empathy and looking at the loss of innocence of many children. So being involved in this exhibition and being invited to participate has been an incredible privilege, and it's been quite a profound experience for me, so I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
My station was Jesus Stumbles for the third time. And I'm always sort of conscious about, especially if you're dealing with real figures, as soon as you give them a figurative representation, you get into all sorts of issues. And when I was thinking about Jesus as an entity, I remembered the whole hoo-ha that went on about Jeffrey Hunter starring as Jesus in I think it was the King of Kings, because he had blue eyes and everyone sort of thought that wasn't quite right and he was too good looking and it's blasphemous showing it. So there's all that sort of stuff, and you're always concerned about kind of cultural background, about gender, those sorts of issues. So to me, all that kind of discourse was really secondary to what the whole theme of the thing was about. Flanks of it are covered with metaphoric shapes, which are again like crosses, and again it's talking about the idea of a tessellation. A cross is a very simple tessellation. All people are kind of roughly the same. We're all kind of born, or at least we're fairly conceived as fairly equal. But however life treats us, we always kind of change. So the tessellations on the sides of the are slowly different. They kind of they morph and they change, and every one of them is unique. The front of it's actually dealing with, again, like an armour plating, because it actually has to move forward through adversity. The vehicle's obviously under duress has actually drifted from its course. So it's straddling that double line. So again, that whole notion of the right side and the wrong side of the road.
Lyndall, thank you for joining us. And for this exhibition, you have station number 3. Can you tell me about your interpretation of that?
Well, it's about Jesus' first fall. And for me, it was very much about my response to the work I'm already making, which is about children and the way we live in society at the moment, where there might be a lot of problems with growing up. It was about my response to we all fall. So in a much more humanistic way, we all fall. How many times do we fall? And I know this is a series of falls. So this is the first fall. So it was like that fresh fall that's very brutal. It's also a mother's story, watching their child fall. So it's about how do you respond to that? I was very affected in Bali with the boys that were killed there last year, and I responded to that I was so taken away with how we did not give them another chance, and so it's a mother's story. It's a mother's story about a fall.
I noticed that there's 3 suns in the background.
The 3 suns for me are about, one, they're about the picture plane and how I can direct your viewing of that picture plane. So they're a device, a painter's device. But they're also about the symbolism of the Father, Son and the Holy Ghost who's looking after you.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Gallery Watch after this very short break. Welcome to Gallery Watch and congratulations, such a successful exhibition.
Well, it's just wonderful to see everyone here, but what has really engaged me is talking to the artists over the past really several months, and some of the depth of the conversations that we see reflected here. You know, the question of the spirituality of our care, you know, like that, and reading that into the story of Jesus's last days. And we see that, you know, in the way that they've engaged with the text that we've given them, but some of the key issues that have been reflected here have been things like the refugee crisis, and something that this church is very involved in. But to hear that reflected back to us and how people hear those echoes in the Christian story has been remarkable. The other really wonderful thing is that the show in its entirety has been picked up with and is going to travel to Bunbury, to the Regional Art Gallery there. So that other people have seen something in this as well. For us as a church putting this on, that's been a great an affirmation of some of the pathos of the human story that's reflected in some of these artworks. There's a certain amount of reflection of what's going on around us. And so when we hear about babies being deported into appalling conditions, we hear about that in a number of these stations here, that people have reflected not just on the text, but they've reflected on the situation around them, and they've enriched me. They really have. I've been really blessed, and I hope as people look at this story that they get some of the sense of the humanness of the tale, like that something that the pains that we all have, the fears that we all have, but also the reconciliation and the chance of redemption in our own suffering that's portrayed in the story, the sense of hope that's there.
Donald, thank you for joining us. How was it managing this exhibition for this year?
It's been most enjoyable because working with the curator in particular, she really got the idea of what we were trying to put over, and this really came through with the artists, and it's been amazing really working with them. One of the things we have tried to do this year again is to introduce a bit more music into the events, because we think art and music go well together, and so we've had them tonight, and then during the week there will be music, not all the time, live music, not all the time, but at some sessions during the week as well, and we think that'll add. And one of the real surprises to me was contacting St George's Grammar Anglican School and the work which they came up with. That was really amazing.
I did station 15, which is the resurrection, and this is the final station of the whole series of the 15. This is the 15th station. The technique that I've used is a block relief print on Belgian linen on a gesso surface, but the actual images that you see are intaglio, so they're acid etchings. So I do the preparation, I create the surface first, and then I do a multi-layered and multi-plate etching over the top.
And tell me, how did you come up with the concept? Obviously this is Christ's resurrection, so
Yeah.
can you tell me more about the images and the symbols involved?
So essentially I thought about the resurrection in terms of renewal. in terms of systems becoming so complex and so convoluted that in combination. So I look at the idea of how, on a global, in a global sense, with the world has become so complex and so complicated with different institutions kind of working in same areas. And so eventually those systems kind of become too complex to be sustainable, and they break down. They kind of undergo a kind of shattering. And I feel as though that shattering then creates new ground. It's a kind of ground for renewal. So that's my version of the resurrection.
How did it feel when you were asked or approached to display some works today for Stations of the Cross?
I was really honoured, and it also, I think it gave me an opportunity to explore the theology in my work, and I was looking at medieval Renaissance images of Mary and Jesus prior to being questioned, to being asked. So I kind of just went with the opportunity. I must admit I was very scared initially to put up the work because I didn't want to have any conflict being an artist, especially a Muslim artist. I want to express my culture in a manner that Westerners can appreciate it and appreciate the reasoning why we do certain things as well. If you can appreciate a Persian carpet, then you must appreciate the person who created the Persian carpet as well. I took it from the medieval period because in Islam we do believe in Jesus Christ, and it's left out in the media that we actually do have, believe in Nabi Isa, that is our prophet. But we don't believe that he was the last prophet because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came after him. Well, so because my religion also stipulates not to use representational images, I struggled with that initially because I didn't want to depict Nabi Isa, Jesus, because he's a very special prophet to me too. I wanted to show that because when he was stripped in the Stations of the Cross, mine was Jesus being stripped. I wanted to initially use the idea of the veiling and the garb that he wore in relation to the veiling of the Islamic female, and the idea of taking her veil off and not allowing her to cover her face, and also the conflict that was, that Jesus faced, and to appropriating it to what's happening now in the political atmosphere, which is really, really disturbing because a lot of the women in my community all veil, and I can see the pressure on them and how it has changed them of just going out in society. And so in a lot of ways, that is me in a niqab, but I wanted to express how I was feeling when I see all my sisters and all my brothers, in the world. I don't know if I'm the only person affected by seeing this sometimes, if you know what I mean. Being a Muslim, because there's so much hatred and demonizing, and I'm sorry to say the political media as well plays on this fear, and instead of creating a world where everyone loves each other and we all have similarities and we're all learning off each other, we're changing that. And I wanted to link it back to the realness of what Islam really is.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Wishing you a safe and happy Easter. I'm Nadia Hunter. See you next time.